To start my series of posts, An Alphabet of Art, I thought I'd begin with A is for art and look at the question of what art actually is. For artists, this is a really important and quite emotive question. We want our work to be seen as art, not a craft, or even worse, a hobby or pastime. It's a question that has evoked many answers over the centuries. Art used to be understood as a human-made form of expression, but in our age of artificial intelligence, even that could be questioned. There's no single definition of art that everyone agrees on. Philosophers have debated the point for centuries, and this has led to the field of study called aesthetics, which explores beauty, creativity, meaning, and how we experience artworks. I asked my 91-year-old mother-in-law what she thought art was, and her answers suggested something superior or highbrow, more technically skilled than some of the pictures on her walls. My pen piece of a magnolia tree was included, but not a hand-stitched 60th wedding anniversary sampler that took me days of work. Not that I totally agree with that definition, but how do we say a piece of art is better than other pictures? For some, art is all about inclusion in galleries and exhibitions. In 1969, George Dickey formalised this idea in his institutional theory of art. It's why a banana stuck on a wall with duct tape is considered art, and why I try hard to get my work in exhibitions. From the work of Plato and Aristotle till the 18th century, art was equated with beauty. Plato saw art as an imitation or representation of a higher, otherworldly, ultimate beauty reflected in the world the artist copied in their paintings. Aristotle viewed its purpose as not just to depict life, but to provide a deeper understanding of it. He saw art as a way to communicate universal truths. When we talked this through and how subjective notions of beauty can be, my lovely husband Steve reminded me of an old joke. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Get it out with Optrex. I want to believe Aristotle, and I can see the truth of Plato's view, given how hard it is to capture that glimpse I first see in something achingly beautiful, in a scene I paint, like the view from Raven's Point. But nowadays, not all art aims to be beautiful. Some have taken things a step further than Aristotle, not just seeing art as a way to communicate profound truths, but believing that all that matters in art is a piece's purpose or function, utility, social impact, or contribution to human society. So my diagrams helping other adult Welsh language learners are a form of art that makes sense given this definition, even though I'd see them more as illustrations rather than art. Others value art for its form, structure, colour and composition. In 1914, Clive Bell heralded the advent of abstract, non-representational art by suggesting that form itself can convey feeling. Before him, in 1890, Maurice Denis suggested that aesthetic pleasure was to be found in the painting itself, not its subject. While I heartily enjoyed creating some art using different textures and focusing on circles, in my experience, people mostly buy my art each time because they love the subject I've painted. In the year 2000, Beres Gort suggested that there were clusters of criteria that contributed to something being art, such as expressing emotion, being intellectually challenging, showing an individual point of view, having the capacity to convey complex meanings, and being produced with creative imagination. Per cluster theory, to be art, something didn't need to satisfy all of the 10 criteria Gort suggested, just some of them. This appeals more to my egalitarianism than some of the other theories of what constitutes art, but it has been criticised for being complicated to apply and subject to changes in the perception of what is important over the course of the history of art. And how many criteria and how much of any one is enough? For example, does a copy of an old master using modern materials have enough creative imagination? One theory is that there is no single feature shared by all artworks. Instead, artworks overlap in a loose network of similarities, like members of a family who resemble each other in different ways. This view is based on Ludwig Wittgenstein's suggestion that concepts do not have strict definitions, but are instead characterized by a series of overlapping similarities. This view of art avoids rigid definitions and embraces diversity, but can feel vague. All that seems to overlap in my 2 prize-winning pieces of art shown behind me are the materials I used: paper, grey pens, and watercolours. They feel very different to each other, but nevertheless are both seen as art by this family resemblance theory of art, as well as by 1 or 2 other art theories. In the writings of Leo Tolstoy and in the Romantic period, art was largely understood as the exterior expression of subjective experiences, emotion, and inner feelings, doing this in a way ordinary language can't. But as my husband Steve just pointed out as we prepared rhubarb from our garden to stew with orange juice and zest, art isn't needed to communicate emotion. Tears will do it. I actively seek to communicate positive feelings through my art. I've been told that in my work I give back to people happy memories, nostalgia that will help them in their lives today. But I defend any artist's right not to share their emotional personal life in their work. Another theory is that to be art, something has to create a special and distinctive kind of attentive, contemplative, and appreciative experience. It's a flexible idea emphasizing the viewer's experience. It's all about pleasure, contemplation, and emotional engagement. It sounds really attractive to me. I love mulling things, and that process where a painting or a concept makes me think and feel in a new way. But it's very subjective. I can imagine people wondering what this aesthetic experience really means, wondering if they're capable of it and chasing it without realizing it was there in them all along. In 1934, John Dewey suggested this effect can be found in ordinary everyday experiences, just maybe to a different degree of intensity depending on the circumstances. I can imagine it in things like holding a newborn child or grandchild for the first time, or seeing your spouse arriving for your wedding. If art doesn't prompt a strong reaction in you, please don't worry. You've probably just not seen the art that does it for you. Art on the subjects you're moved by, Or maybe you've never had the time to really sit with the right piece of art.